the mind of a human being is quite complex. When we take into consideration the upbringing we've had, the social, family, school, all kinds of education, all kinds of, in essence, training, come to, in many ways, impede our growth. Of course, it goes without saying that the intention behind, being in a caring family or a circle of people, whether it's the school or the education that we're getting, basically, it might be, for all intents and purposes, for the good of the person. However, rarely is that the case when you think about how much of an influence that has on the makeup of the person's thinking, behaving, relationships, and the relationship building which is taking place. Because, bottom line is, unless we're talking about those very few exceptions where they have the right stuff around them, and that primarily is because of the good karmic circumstances that they have set for themselves, where they've landed and now they have those luxuries. Even those can actually backfire. When the person has too much pleasure, too much comfort, where they become detached. So we have to be careful not to look at this as a black and white set of circumstances. But my intention here is to bring the attention back to the influences one is exposed to while growing up, because nobody is technically taught at birth, basically, of how to be a pushover. Okay, no one is born, maybe I should put it that way, but we are trained to become that. We are trained to become nice. We are trained to become individuals who are strongly made in the image of other people's thoughts, in their concepts, whatever they have. That is what people start to impose, try to chisel you into that. Fear is one. We are taught to be afraid from a very young age. It could be anything. You see the world is in such a terrible mess right now, and when you narrow it down, especially in certain parts of the world, there's absolute, complete hatred towards, from one group towards another, simply because they were born the other side of the fence. Meanwhile, when you look at their heritage, DNA, they're so similar, but there's so much hatred. Same thing with the world around us. The elements. Fear of death, fear of the unknown, fear of the other. But we are not born like that. We are taught to become that way. And if the person lives long enough and is interested in what other scenarios might be in the world that could present a different worldview, and they're interested, as I said, in such things, possibilities, and the person finds such avenues of thinking, then now they're going to engage themselves with the long-winded task of unraveling all that, to unlayer all that nonsense, those ideologies. We are the best. Our race is the best. Our nation is the best. Our history is the best. Our language is the best. Our, you name it, is the best. They are our sworn enemies. They over there are the, you add, whatever adjectives. And unfortunately, they don't stay as adjectives because there's a lot of emotion attached to it. There's so much anger, there's so much hatred in people's hearts. But we are not born with those. That's what I'm trying to say. People are, just like we are trained to be afraid, we are also trained to have certain emotions over others. Now, how many people are really going to dedicate enough time and energy to really try to unravel, to separate the wheat from the chaff, to separate the nonsense from what is true, from what is really helpful, what is intelligent, what is wise? How many? And when you add to the mix the wrong education that children nowadays are being fed, unless they are born in a family where the parents are wise, smart, intelligent, responsible, with common sense, decency, virtue, and just the foresight to think about the future, and then they pull them out of the school systems, anywhere in the world, by the way, and do some homeschooling, to have some role to play as decent, intelligent, responsible, accountable parents, thinking about the future of the child and of society. Otherwise, you can kiss those kids goodbye. That's what's been happening in the world. So, on one end, the family was, or the society, the school was, and has been, indoctrinating the children to think a certain way, to feel a certain way. And then when they become teenagers, and let's say they graduate even, but long before that happens, there is peer pressure. Now, the peer pressure doesn't just happen in middle school or even primary school. It's happening all the time. And sometimes people make the wrong assumption that peer pressure takes place within adolescence or while the individual is in high school. But after that, they're on their own. Once they go into college or they're, even if they leave school, or let's say they're in the labor force, or they're on the streets, they don't have peer pressure. No, you have peer pressure until you die, until you go to the grave. You have peer pressure all over, from family members, from friends, from colleagues, from classmates. When you know what this happens to be, let's say the thing that you're doing, when you know it to be unhealthy for you and you're doing it nevertheless, and when you're asked about it, why do you smoke? Well, I know it's not healthy, I know it's costly, I know, why do you drink? Why do you do weed? I know it's bad, I know it's affecting my concentration, I know it's affecting my mood, it's not getting, but why are you doing it? Another thing that we are taught is to be dishonest towards ourselves, which is the worst. You know, you can complain about your partner, your wife, your husband, your boyfriend, your girlfriend, your family, your parents even, your teachers, your rulers, your presidents, your, I don't know, senators, whatever. Your boss, you can blame them of being dishonest at one point or another, if it's true. But it's not as bad as realizing that you've been the worst among them. The most dishonest, that is, towards yourself. This is something that, unfortunately, people don't get an education in. We're not prepared for this. We're not prepared for how to put a stop to it at some point, unless decades have passed, where you have been leeched constantly, leeched over constantly. A leech is, by the way, a parasite. It attaches itself to you and it keeps sucking on your blood. And it will not let go. It bites into, and first it excretes this, in a sense it's an anesthesia. You don't feel that bite. Once it's done that, then it starts putting its teeth into you and it starts sucking the blood. You won't know until you see it, what's happening. And then you try to pull it. If you do, it's going to be even worse. So one of the ways to do that is to light a match or expose it to some, like a fire source, like a candle or a match, something like that, and it will fall off on its own. Otherwise, it will fall off when it is fully fed on your blood. Now, you might never come to see a leech nor experience one. Physical, actual leech. But something tells me that all of us have been leeched, are being, in fact. At the very least, we have been doing it to ourselves. That is, by not allowing ourselves to see things the way they really are. Our concepts, our ideas, our wrong beliefs, we feed ourselves those lies, just like that anesthesia that leech squeezes, excretes into us to numb ourselves. And then what happens? Then you can tell yourself any kind of lie you want. Why? Well, to make this humdrum of a life pass by with a little bit more color, maybe even with a little bit more speed, to become more acceptable, this pain of yours, and maybe even to glorify it. Whether in Buddhism or other traditions, you have this irrational dedication that one has towards being of service to others. It's not just in Christianity or in Bhakti or that devotional being of service to others, which is one of the tricks that the mind plays. You can blame it on Mara, the evil one, Satan, whatever, to get you to procrastinate, to push away what needs to be done now, which is the work that needs to be done on you, by you. No one else can really alleviate your pain, ultimately. But we have been fed the wrong education that says, no, 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 no. So long as you are in service of others, you're working for the sake of others, you are trying to help others, then your life will become worthwhile. You're going to be a happy person. In fact, even if you can't find it here, you're going to find it in the kingdom of God somewhere. No, it's not just the Christians. In Buddhism, eventually they came up with 1,000 years or so after the Buddha died, they came up with that bogus tradition which is called bodhisattva, being a bodhisattva, which was an idea that was essentially based on the character. It's not a Mahayana term that they just invented, but it found its roots in the example and character of the Buddha himself. And only a bodhisattva can become a Buddha. But then they generalize it and they just spread it all over, that wrong view, saying that that is the goal. Forget about, push away the possibility of you attaining. In fact, that is a low-level attainment. That is low. Meanwhile, the whole teaching of the Buddha for 45 years, that is exactly what the Buddha taught, which they denied now. They completely abhorred. They completely pushed away. They minimized. They even called the tradition of the Buddha, to which they attributed their own teachings to be linked to the roots of, as Hinayana. Hina means low, and theirs, of course, conveniently enough, they called Maha, the great vehicle. Meanwhile, the Buddha's own path itself, they call the lower vehicle, because you're just focused on your own salvation. Well, how can a sick person heal another person? How can a leper come and give you, a new dressing on your wound? When how can it be when a person who is infected with some virus claim that they can help you when they cannot even help themselves, when they haven't healed? So the Arahant is a person who has healed himself. Only a person who knows how to heal can heal. How can a person who's still eating out of the trash can come to you and say, I'm going to teach you how to have a 5-star Michelin star meal, beautiful, immaculate dishes, the best of the best, while the person is sitting in the garbage, eating out of rubbish? A person who has this terrible stench, having not showered for 3 years, coming to you and talking to you about cleanliness, would you listen to them? I think you get my point here. Well, that's what the Mahayana is all about. When you look at it carefully, it's absolute nonsense. Nonsense. How can I, who has not worked on himself, I haven't worked on myself, come to you and say, I'm going to save you? I'm actually delaying my own awakening so that I can help you to awaken. That's what the Bodhisattva is saying, essentially. That's their vow. Complete rubbish. Complete denial of what the Buddha taught. So how can one be asked to put these together and say, this is the Buddha's teaching? It's just a different tradition that eventually came out. No. It completely shunned the great teacher's work. Not just the legacy, but the path itself, because they completely convoluted it. Because martyrdom can never be virtue. It doesn't work like that. But you're living on a planet where martyrdom is the thing to go and do. It's the easiest thing. The person says, oh, I'm dedicating my life to God. In fact, my life means nothing because I'm giving it to God, for example, in some traditions, religions, which basically, if you look at it in a certain angle, you see the same bodhisattva nonsense to be the same. It's nonsense. Meanwhile, the person is living a terrible, horrific life as the rest of us are concerned. The person's behavior, actions, work, speech, virtue is their virtue. That takes guts. Being a martyr is easy. You just need a few fools around you who say, yes, he was a martyr, he was this and that. And it's like, it's easy. But to live with virtue means you're signing the contract every single day to live with a higher set of ideals that require you to, day in, day out, to put everything on the line. Because it's easy to just give up your life for the sake of something. And there's a lot of, when you have such wrong beliefs everywhere, every religion has them. It's the easiest way to attain a reputation. They'll make you a martyr, right? They'll build statues, they'll build monuments for you, they'll, unless somebody comes along and actually researches what exactly was your life like. What did you count on to go ahead and become a martyr for? What was it done for? Could you have done something more while alive? Which means, in other words, could you have done things that required more of you? People go ahead and like kamikazes and they kill themselves. Okay, there's nothing noble in that. In Japan, people were committing harakiri because they couldn't handle the shame. But they wanted to die a noble death and this and that, and they would cut themselves. I don't understand where the nobility in that is. It's just like those Norse legends and, people dying in the battle with the sword. If they don't have a sword in hand, then they're not going to go to Valhalla or something like that to join their god somewhere. All this, it's nonsense. You are killing another person. It's not a Viking thing only now we're dealing with. It's the whole world. People are just eager to become a hero overnight. It takes a lot more than that. In the old days, they used to call them martyrs. Today, they're going and be called, hero. Everybody was going to, Afghanistan or some war somewhere that some politician was coming up with, without sending their own sons, obviously, to fight. Anybody who was going and coming back, they were coming back heroes. Why? You went and pillaged and destroyed other people's homes, lives. You did that. Where's the hero part in all of this? Why is there a hero's welcome for you? We have to question these things. This is what I mean by also peer pressure. So today, it's not just people in college or in high school or middle school that are creating peer pressure. YouTube is peer pressure. Instagram is peer pressure. Netflix is peer pressure. Facebook is peer pressure. And you add to the list. Telegram, I guess. What is the other one? TikTok, I think. All of these are peer pressure. The news is peer pressure to tell you, command you what to think. And everybody's dying to get in line to become part of this political party, that political party. I've known people who were in their 70s and they were ready to go and kill the opposing elected person. the opposing party's elected person, whom they were adamantly hateful. One person said, if they can just like point me the way, I'm going to go and kill that person. I was like, wow, 70-some-year-old person, full of rage against or towards this person whom they have never met. And I asked him, have you known this person? He's like, I don't need to know. I've known enough. How? I said, I'm not affiliated with them, I'm just curious. He said, well, because of the news, what I've heard, and I believe it, and that's the end of that. Well, okay, look at that 70-some-year-old man who's lived on this planet for over 7 decades. Some people will never reach that age. And somebody who is just born. That 70-year-old man was a testimony of the upbringing that he has received and has been receiving up until that moment. This person did not know how to be himself and not be able to say, I don't have all the answers. He's been trained, fed, bred to say, to think exactly what they wanted him to. He's been leeched out. And under the guise of doing something noble. Crusaders were doing the same thing. With the sword to go and kill. Now, you go parts of the world and everywhere is in flames now. How many people are pausing and saying, what am I doing? Is this what life is all about? Fighting for power, fighting for resources. These leaders, some of them are in their 80s, some maybe older. They think they're going to live forever. That's also a training that people receive from a young age. That as long as you're getting away with it, and you're not being caught, and you're surrounded by people who will cover for you, who will protect you, and you do whatever they tell you to, and you're going to be set. Okay, afterwards, what's going to happen? They have no idea about karma, about actions. And they only will find out about it once it's too late. Once it's too late. So, to be able to say, enough, this world is, to be lived with a certain level of joy, of understanding, of peace in your heart. And that peace does not need to be looked at, outside, to be gotten, to be received from the outside. Otherwise, it's the same thing as a leech. And a leech will never do that. But that's the world. That's how the world is designed. It's always trying to get your attention, if you give it. So what do you need to do? You need to shut the world, at least for a certain portion of your day, where you can simply be by yourself, avoiding being harassed by this or that, especially because you're dealing with the mind. That's what I was saying in the beginning, how the mind that we possess is so complex. Just on its own, and then when you add the training not in a good way, of course, the upbringing, the programming, if you will. They don't have the best of intentions, the schools, in mind. When they're training or teaching a child, there's a lot of damage that's being done. Because it's creating a certain level of expectations in the mind of the person, of the child, of the adolescent. So you now have a certain worldview. Well, what if that worldview, that dictionary that you now carry, is completely flawed? How will you proceed to know what's what? You won't. because your interpretation of life is going to be wrong. Now, the helpful marker here is life. Because despite what you have been told about, let's say, being afraid, or you have to be nice to the world, so you have to do this, you have to sacrifice yourself. Yes, I know, but you have to sacrifice yourself to be, to get attention, to get love. You have to earn love. Okay? What if you happen to be the son or the daughter of parents who raise you like that? Which is basically hell in disguise. It's hellish to start a child with the mindset, with the indoctrination that they need to do something. The child has to do something to perform in order for the child to receive love, attention, a lovely gaze from mom, a lovely hug from dad, a good statement. We have set that child for failure. Because, remember the marker I said? Life presents us with markers. What do I mean by that? Markers of facts. When you come in contact with people, with actual individuals through relationships, any kind of relationship, you will be hit over the head with sudden blows of unexpected blows, unexpected results, because you're going to end up thinking that, well, I should be getting this because I've been doing this. Well, life doesn't work like that. That is already a big indication that your system was wrong. Whatever they taught you, the algorithm they fed you was completely flawed. This is why what I meant by people are being fed from a very young age, being trained to be afraid, being trained to be pushovers, for others to come and push you over, basically, to take away things, to take away your time, which is your biggest asset. Well, what if you live up to be 40 or 50 years old, and you've given so much of your life to a person, a group of people, a company, organization, your society, your country, etc., etc. And then you wake up. If you wake up and you're still alive and you're not on a stretcher or on a wheelchair, and you still got your lungs working and you're not paralyzed, and you realize, that's still good, because the person now has a chance to recover from the damage. But unfortunately, at different points in life, people do come across moments of, what was that? I might have, now I see. But what do they do? Most of us, unfortunately, we go back because of the intensity of the indoctrination. Unless the pain that we get inflicted by is so intense, unless the loss we've incurred, we've been, handed, is so tremendous that brings us to our knees, then we have to make a choice. Is this what life's all about? Am I willing to go ahead and continue doing this? Unfortunately, majority of us will do so. We will fall in line. We will just abide by our old system. And this is what I understand when we talk about just being programmed in doing. Because ultimately, when you think of it, so long as you have air in your lungs, you're able to breathe, you have the ability to turn your life around. Because you owe it to nobody, your life. There's nothing noble about becoming a martyr. Nothing noble about being a so-called bodhisattva when you are relinquishing taking care of yourself, your emotions. Because that's what it is. People go ahead and dedicate their lives to helping animals, helping pets, helping, I don't know, the environment. Meanwhile, when you look and take a peek into their lives, you see they're deplorable people. They're terrible people. They have no conscience when it comes to other human beings or their own loved ones, so-called loved ones. But they go ahead or halfway across the world to help the, I don't know, native birds of this island, or the dogs over there, the, you know, street dogs over here. But they will not help a person cross the street who needs help. Remember the martyrdom? It looks good. They can send those pictures on Facebook. They can announce it to the world and feel good about themselves. This is a very pathetic person. And most of these bodhisattva types are very pathetic. You don't want to spend an afternoon with them. Really. I've spent time with these characters, such characters. If you have love towards yourself, true, genuine love, then you can't help but be so loving towards everything, everyone. Birds, street dogs, anything. People of different color, different race, different religion. You're basically respectful. With every gesture, you're creating things. You're bringing such blessings, basically, to the world. You're able to create. But these people who are after destroying the planet, destroying societies, committing genocide while the world stands there and watches, and they get away with it, they think, they cannot even create one single thing. They cannot even set up a dinner table properly. They cannot even cook a delicious meal. They cannot even make bread. These people. But it sounds good when they use lofty terms like, oh, I'm doing this, I'm doing that. Look at me, look at me. I look good in a suit. Look at me with all. But it takes guts to sit down and say, I'm going to create something. Not destruction, but create harmony, create joy in people's lives, especially if you don't know them. If you want to be a martyr of your own ego. Drop that idiocy and go ahead and do something different than what you have been given with all these wrong beliefs. Think about that person that you hate, that you've been told to hate, by the way, and think about, does that person have grandchildren like I do? Okay, could he or she be truly loving towards his grandchildren? I wonder, how are they like together? Do they laugh? Do they play? There's no... That is treading onto unknown territory of humanity within you. This is breaking yourself free from old ways of thinking, cowardly ways of thinking. But people like to also, in the case of, now I'll address people's wrong views about the Buddha. There's many, many wrong views, like I said, about this whole bodhisattva lie that people have been fed. You have hundreds of millions of Buddhists believing in that nonsense, and countless more over the centuries. It all started because of laziness, you know. Because only a lazy person could come up with some idea that says, well, in fact, I'm going to take the high road by delaying my awakening, as if it's in your hands, while I'm helping all the beings in all the universe for all times. In fact, I'm going to keep coming back again and again until every single being is awakened. Well, what if every single being treads the same idiotic path as you? Good luck. Nobody's going to be awakened. And is that why Lord Buddha kept on saying, Urgency, urgency. Imagine your hair and body or your beard is on fire. Do you delay? Do you say, I'll extinguish the fire tomorrow? You have to function with that sense of urgency, because life is coming at you from all 6 sense doors. Pain is coming at you. Even if you can't see, old age is here. Decaying is happening all the time. Why do you think we celebrate birthdays? We're simply trying to say, yeah, I made it. I made it for, one more year. It's just self-deception. Death is around the corner. If not you, your loved ones are going. That is painful. So what are you talking about? Delaying your own awakening for the sake of others. It's totally absurd. But if you speak like this, people are very quick. Nowadays you have these bhikkhus or Buddhist monks who say, no, we have to be accepting of all traditions. But what if those all traditions that you're talking about are not teaching, are not basing their teachings and their lifestyle upon what the Buddha taught? So what am I making or including into this dispensation that's called Buddhism? What am I really doing? Service or disservice? Because what you have, as I was saying earlier, people's misconceptions about the Buddha. For example, they think that the Buddha was very soft. These people have no idea what they're talking about, but people have presented him as being someone like that. That's very soft, very accommodating, very forgiving, very, laissez-faire, as they say, let them be type of a thing. Yeah, sure, yeah, you'll take that path, that's fine, yeah. It's not like that. If they read the suttas, if they actually get to encounter the Buddha, how he really was, and see how at times he had to be very stern. And no, he didn't give teachings all the time. For example, when people came in to debate or to try to, they came like a closed box, completely sealed. I'm referring to their mind as a metaphor here. They did not have any intentions of learning anything. They wanted to come and impose their opinions onto the Buddha without being interested at all in whatever the Buddha might have said. So one of the ways to keep silent was because the person is an idiot. They're not there to learn. There's not going to be any pedagogical devices available to them because the person is simply closed off. So the Buddha was very sharp depending on the circumstances. Many people would be shocked today. But because people have become so passive, so soft, and so lacking a spine in saying this is wrong, this is right, on their own, instead of looking up other people's statements and going off of that, instead of really understanding it themselves, which takes guts. Pacchattam veditabbo vinyuhi is the qualifier, okay, for the Dhamma. This is the last qualifier when we are chanting the qualities of the Dhamma. What this is referring to is to be realized by the wise for themselves. That means you cannot collectively bring about salvation, okay? And the Buddha was not ever a savior. This is another thing that people get shocked about. They think, oh, he was a martyr, or he came and he was going to save us. Or I have to bow down to the Buddha and he's going to save me 26 centuries later somehow. Well, even while he was alive, he didn't save anybody. He did not save anyone. This should not come as a shock. It's just a fact. I'm not making any of this stuff up. What he did was he gave us countless tools, however. Countless tools. You can just pick one. Pick the Four Noble Truths and pick the last bit of the Four Noble Truths, which is the Noble Eightfold Path. Nowhere does it say, hold the edges of your teacher's robes as you're walking the path. No, every single one of those 8 has the person in mind, the individual, you. It's your right speech, not someone else's. It's not the Buddha's right speech. It's your right speech. So if you have deluded intentions, don't expect there to be right action showing up somehow. If you have from the start, from the get-go, you have wrong view, how in the world are you going to get to what can only be the product, the end result of right view, meaning awakening, or even metta? It doesn't work. So even when it comes to the Brahma Viharas, the 4, ineffectively or insufficiently is translated in English as the 4 divine abidings, metta, karuna, mudita, upekkha, loving kindness, compassion, spiritual or altruistic joy, and equanimity. If you have, in therapy I used to call this Swiss cheese type of boundary. When people would come and say, "Oh, doc, I'm very giving. I love to do this. I love to do that. I love to help these people, those people over there. I love doing this." I was like, "Okay, fine, wonderful, wonderful, great. What do you do for yourself? What are your dreams?" They just draw blank. They don't know what to say. They don't know how that feels. This is the same thing as being that nice person that they were trained to become. They're beggars, even while they're in diapers. Being taught that in order for them to get some love, even from mommy, they need to do something. They need to look cute. They need to be of service first to earn their love. This is wrong. But that's what our society is all about. You have to achieve. You have to become a great person, meaning you have to be recognized. You have to have status. You have to look this way, that way, this. But there's this thing called impermanence happening all the time. Nothing sticks. Nothing is constant. Love has to be, however. And no, love is not to be earned through some service you do, because that's very sneaky. That's the martyr's path, which does not have even a single iota of true virtue in it. It's very sneaky. It's very manipulative. It's not metta. It's not, definitely not compassion. So I've had students who would come and you look and so I have to ask questions and then I have to observe them and I look and it's like, okay, they're saying the right words. So they've done their homework when it comes to researching what is metta, what this teacher, that teacher said about it. But as the Buddha says, spend some time with them to see how much truth is there in what they're saying. If the person knows how to really show love to themselves, then there's not going to be a need to advertise anything. It doesn't come up. So if the person's holes are plugged up, meaning they're no longer any like Swiss cheese type of boundary, that means they are self-sufficiently available for themselves, able to give themselves love without any guilt. That means they are able to really be compassionate towards themselves, which also means they are so abundant in their love and compassion that they can naturally overflood and overflow from the brim and joyously, that's why it's called altruistic joy. It's not melancholy. it's joy, that the person naturally, they can't help it. It floods, it gives away, it shows up. It's no longer a leech situation. There's no manipulation in the Brahma Viharas. There's no manipulation in compassion. But unfortunately, with all this recent 10 years or 15 years of spreading of so-called Dhamma in circles and retreats, this and that, everybody's like, yeah, I do metta, just like I do mindfulness. Yeah, I do this, or yeah, I include mindfulness in everything I do. I hope they do, but based on what has been observed, nothing could be further from the truth. Because the person is simply trying to substitute their lack of love with, oh, let me give love. Well, if you don't have it, how are you going to give it? If your holes are so big that you're leaking, please don't confuse that leaking as giving. There's a huge difference here. Because you don't know how to say no. And it takes guts to say no. A wise person says no. Has no fear in saying no. The Buddha said no to so many people. That's why they're categorically wrong, including some bhikkhus who say, oh, the Buddha was this, oh, he wasn't harsh. No, he was, according to the situation. Someone came, some people think, the Buddha never used the word kill, for example. There was one Brahmin who came because he was mad that his wife was a devout follower of the Buddha, a venerator, a reverer of the Buddha. He was annoyed by her love and respect towards the teacher. So he's like, I'm fed up with this. So he goes straight to the Buddha, wanting to trap him in some type of a debate. He says, is there any kind of a thing, any situation where you advocate the killing of something? And he thought, the moment he says, I encourage the killing of, he was going to say, aha, I got you. How can anyone call you a saint? How can anyone call you a teacher? But the Buddha says, I do encourage the killing. And he's like, okay, let's wait. Let's see what he's going to say. But he was not expecting the answer that the Buddha gave. He says, I encourage, advocate, instruct, and inspire students to kill hatred and anger. Ooh. Tell that to these world leaders today. Tell those people in the Middle East committing genocide in broad daylight. Genocide. While they go to sleep with their, around their loved ones, completely fine, while children are dying. People are dying. There's fear. Everybody's trying to gain acceptance. And one of the worst things you could do is to seek out ways of being accepted, but while using the language of Dhamma, which is unfortunately what I've been noticing, observing close at hand, happen in the world of Buddhist teachers, many of whom monks. And no, not just Mahayana, I'm talking about Theravada. For decades I've been seeing this. It's to be expected, because if you have read the suttas, if you know anything about the suttas and what the Buddha taught about the future days, there's no surprise. He said all these things would be happening. Misrepresentation, flat out lies, misintroducing, complete corruption of the Dhamma. That's what we're seeing with these characters that write books and have, are recognized around the world as real, authentic teachers. But they remain far from it. Why, though? The seeking of acceptance has become the norm. Whether it's the politician who's ordering nuclear strikes, for example, or committing genocide, or robbing people, robbing people from their wealth, from their savings, from their pensions, their social security, while they amass money. What is that? Everybody's seeking some form of acceptance, and that takes us back to how were we trained? If you are allowing leeches to eat off of you, suck your blood, guess what? You have become also. The person has become one's own leech, ultimately, because all you have is this life. How are you spending it? How are you really spending it? So if you're really living with virtue, you can't afford to do any such stupid things, because you really take it to heart what's happening and get back on the saddle of your life and take charge and change the direction, the trajectory of your life. Because time is passing very quickly. Sooner than later, you're going to die. Or you're not going to have at least the resources you have today. So, unfortunately, we can't go back to the way we were as infants, as babies, before being indoctrinated, before being trained according to the dictates of those around us, influences. But fortunately, as adults, as more wiser people with more resources, we can identify if the dictionary that I'm holding is adequate or truthful, reflective of life or not. And then I don't have to go ahead and look for the right ones. I'll toss it into the fire. Those wrong beliefs, and courageously choose the path of virtue and not stupid martyrdom. That is, what are you being martyr of, by the way, one might ask? Well, your own self-aggrandizing, your own conceit. That's what it is. The most conceited people are those martyrs. Really. Imagine the ego of the person who says, okay, when I die, all these people are going to worship me. They're going to build, monuments. They're going to do this and this. That's very egocentric. No, go ahead and live your life, if you dare, where every day you're a martyr. You know what it means to sacrifice. Sacrifice what? Your old, wrong beliefs. Cut them off courageously. And that is going to put you on the path of virtue. That's going to give you the life of dignity. That is a heroic life. Not someone who takes guns and weapons and goes to someone else's backyard or home and destroys it, comes back a hero. That's stupid. You're not defending your home, You're going overseas. You're going somewhere that you can't even pronounce. There's no heroic thing that you could possibly do to sanctify that role, to make it honorable even. Try to live life virtue in your neck of the woods. I challenge you. That's harder than carrying a weapon and hurting someone else. Would you like someone to hurt your child, your home, to take it away from you? Of course not. And don't do it to others. That's the basic principle of karma. So how much of the rubbish are you carrying? Live without being a leech to yourself. And learn the difference between martyrdom and virtue. For never the twain shall meet.